Tom Baker sits on his favorite park bench on a quiet autumn morning. At 75, he's been coming here every day since retirement, feeding the pigeons and watching children play near the old fountain. The morning sun feels warm on his face as leaves drift down from the maple trees overhead. A shadow falls across his bench. Looking up, he sees a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Something about her seems familiar, the way she holds herself, the gentle smile on her face. "Hello, Tom," she says softly. "You loved me once, a long time ago." His heart skips a beat as recognition dawns. Mary Thompson, his first love. The girl who moved away in 1965, taking his heart with her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sleep refuses to come to Tom that night. He lies in his bed, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy circles, his mind replaying the morning's encounter over and over. Mary Thompson, after all these years. At 3 in the morning, he finally gives up on sleep. His joints protest as he climbs the narrow stairs to his attic, pulling the cord for the single bulb that casts yellow light across decades of stored memories. In the corner, under a stack of old National Geographics, he finds what he's looking for, a leather photo album with cracked spine and musty pages. The first photo makes his breath catch. Summer, 1965. Mary in a yellow sundress, laughing as she tries to shield the camera with her hand. They're at the county fair, and he remembers the moment perfectly. How the cotton candy had made her fingers sticky, how the Ferris wheel operator had let them ride twice because it was quiet that day. He turns the page. There they are, at her high school graduation, his arm around her waist, both of them believing they had all the time in the world. Another shows them at the lake, their friends splashing in the background while they share a private joke. The images are faded, but the memories they trigger are sharp as ever. His phone buzzes, making him jump. It's Sarah, his daughter. "Dad, everything okay? You never call this late." He hadn't even realized he'd dialed her number. "I saw someone. Today," he says, surprised by the tremor in his voice. "At the park." "Someone?" There's a rustling sound as Sarah sits up in bed. "Dad, it's 3 in the morning. Mary Thompson." A pause. The Mary Thompson. "Your Mary? She's not my Mary," he says automatically, then looks down at the photo in his lap. "She never was, really, but yes, that Mary." "Oh, Dad," Sarah's voice softens. "Tell me everything." So he does. Tells her about the morning sun and the maple leaves and the shadow across his bench. About Mary's silver hair and kind eyes, and how somehow 60 years melted away in an instant. "We're meeting for coffee tomorrow," he finishes, "at that little place near the park. The one with the good scones," Sarah asks, and he can hear her smile. "Want me to come with you?" "No," he says, perhaps too quickly. "No, I think I need to do this on my own." After they hang up, Tom stays in the attic until dawn, moving through the album page by page. Each photo is a stepping stone through their past, picnics and dances, summer afternoons and autumn evenings. He lingers over the last one, taken just days before she left. They're standing in front of his father's Buick, Mary holding a small suitcase. Even then, they didn't know it was really goodbye. He wonders what happened to the other photos. The ones never taken, the graduation from college they'd planned to attend together, the trips they'd dreamed about, the life they'd thought stretched endlessly ahead. When the sun finally rises, Tom carefully returns the album to its spot under the magazines. His back aches from sitting on the attic floor, and his eyes feel gritty from lack of sleep. But as he looks in the bathroom mirror, straightening his collar and combing his thin white hair, he sees something he hasn't seen in years, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. On his dresser, the photo of Helen, his late wife, catches the morning light. "You'd laugh at me, wouldn't you?" he says softly to her image. "Old fool, getting worked up over a girl from high school." But Helen had known about Mary. They'd talked about their first loves early in their marriage. She'd understand, he thinks. Maybe she'd even approve. He checks his watch. 4 hours until coffee. 4 hours to remember how to be the man who once loved Mary Thompson while staying the man he's become in all the years since. The coffee shop smells of cinnamon and fresh-baked scones. Tom arrives 20 minutes early, choosing a quiet corner table where sunlight streams through the front window. He orders a black coffee and watches the door, his heart jumping every time the bell chimes. At exactly 10 o'clock, Mary walks in. She's wearing a blue cardigan that brings out her eyes, her silver hair neatly styled. In her arms, she carries what looks like an old book bound in faded red cloth. Their eyes meet, and for a moment, neither moves. Then Mary smiles, and the awkwardness breaks like ice in spring. "I wasn't sure what you drink now," Tom says, standing, as she approaches. "Still tea with honey," she replies. "Some things never change." While she orders, Tom studies her profile. The years have left their mark, laugh lines around her eyes, a gentle softening of her jaw, but her essence remains unchanged. The way she thanks the barista, the slight tilt of her head as she considers the pastry case, even the sound of her shoes on the wooden floor, it's all achingly familiar. "I brought something," she says when she returns, setting the red book on the table, "my journal from 1965. Tom's hand trembles slightly as he reaches for his coffee cup. "You kept it all these years?" "I kept everything." She opens the journal. Carefully, its pages brown with age. "I thought, well, there are things you should know about why I left." "Your father's illness," Tom says. "You had to move to Boston to help care for him." Mary looks up, surprised. "You knew?" "Mrs. Henderson told my mother, who told me, but by then—" He trails off, remembering those bitter days of silence. "By then, my letters were being returned, unopened." Mary's voice holds no accusation, just a gentle sadness. "I wrote to you every week for months." "What?" Tom sets his cup down too hard, coffee sloshing. "I never received any letters." Mary opens her journal to a marked page. "September 15, 1965, she reads. "Dear Journal, another letter came back today. Dad says Tom must have moved, but I know that's not true. Someone must be sending them back, but why? Doesn't he want to hear from me at all?" The pieces suddenly click into place. "My father?" Tom says quietly. "He must have. He never approved of us. Said I needed to focus on college, not waste time pining over a girl who'd moved away." "Oh, Tom." Mary reaches across the table, her hand covering his. Her touch is warm, familiar in a way that makes his chest ache. "All these years, I thought you'd chosen to let me go, and I thought you'd found a new life in Boston, one that didn't include writing to your small-town boyfriend." They sit in silence for a moment, processing 6 decades of misunderstanding. Outside, a group of school children passes by, their laughter floating through the window. "I did find a new life," Mary says finally. "A good one. I married David. He was a doctor at the hospital where my father was treated. We had 3 wonderful children, but there were nights, especially after David passed 5 years ago, when I'd take out this journal and wonder about you, about us, about all the what-ifs." Tom nods. "After Helen died last year, I found myself doing the same thing, remembering the park, the dances, the plans we made. We were so young," Mary says, smiling at a page in her journal. "Listen to this. Tom and I picked out names for our future children today. If it's a girl, Elizabeth, a boy, James." She looks up. What did you name your children?" "Sarah and James," Tom says softly. Mary's eyes widen. "James? You still—" "Some things stick with you, I guess. Helen liked the name too." He pauses. "What about you?" "Michael, Robert, and—" She hesitates, then laughs. "And Elizabeth." The coincidence hangs between them, a thread connecting their separate lives. Mary turns another page in her journal, and a pressed flower falls out, brown and fragile but still recognizable as a daisy. "From the park," she says. "The day before I left, you made me a crown of them, remember? You sneezed the whole time because of your allergies," Tom recalls, "but you wore it anyway." They share a laugh, and suddenly the weight of 60 years begins to feel less like a burden and more like a bridge, connecting who they were to who they've become. Sarah arrives unannounced at Tom's house on Sunday afternoon, carrying a folder full of old family documents she's dug out of her basement. She finds her father in the garden, pruning roses that have bloomed faithfully every year since her mother planted them. "I did some digging," she says, settling onto the patio chair, "about the Thompsons." Tom sets his pruning shears down. "Sarah, did you know our families lived on the same street in the 1940s, before you and Mary were even born?" She pulls out a yellowed newspaper clipping showing a community picnic. "Look, there's Grandpa with Mr. Thompson before the falling out." "What falling out?" "That's just it, Dad. I called Aunt June. You know how she remembers all the old gossip. Apparently your father and Mary's father were business partners. Once something went wrong. June wasn't clear on the details, but that's why he sent Mary's letters back. It wasn't just about you and her." Tom sinks into the chair beside his daughter, the weight of this revelation settling over him. "All these years, there's more." Sarah hesitates. "I found Mary's son Michael on Facebook. He's concerned about you two seeing each other." Concerned. He thinks his mother's vulnerable since losing his father. He doesn't want her getting hurt. Tom understands the protective instinct. He's seen it in Sarah's eyes too, though she's trying to hide it. "We're just two old friends catching up." "Dad," Sarah's voice is gentle, "I saw your face when you told me about meeting her. This isn't just catching up." Before Tom can respond, a car pulls into the driveway. Mary steps out, then helps a tall, serious-looking man in his 50s exit the passenger side. Michael. Tom recognizes him from Mary's descriptions over coffee. "I hope you don't mind," Mary calls out, looking slightly nervous. "We were nearby, and I thought, well, maybe it's time everyone met." Sarah stands, smoothing her shirt. Tom watches as his daughter and Mary's son size each other up, both trying to gauge the other's intentions. "Mr. Baker," Michael says stiffly, extending his hand, "I've heard a lot about you recently." "Tom, please." He shakes Michael's hand, noting the firm grip, the careful evaluation in the younger man's eyes. "Would you all like some tea? I just made a fresh pot." As they settle around the patio table, Tom notices how Mary takes in the garden, her eyes lingering on Helen's roses. "These are beautiful," she says softly. "My mother planted them," Sarah explains, then adds, almost apologetically, "they were her pride and joy." "Helen had wonderful taste," Mary says. "I remember her garden winning ribbons at the county fair." Michael looks up sharply. "You knew his wife?" "From the garden club," Mary explains. "We weren't close, but, well, it's a small town. Our paths crossed occasionally." "Mom never mentioned that," Sarah says. "Why would she?" Mary's smile is kind. "I was just another club member then. Helen was lovely. She always shared her rose cultivation secrets with newcomers." Tom watches as something subtle shifts in Sarah's expression. The idea that Mary had known Helen, had respected her, seems to ease some tension he hadn't even realized his daughter was carrying. Michael, however, remains concerned. "Mom, don't you think this is all moving a bit fast? You and Mr. Baker." "Tom," Mary corrects gently. "Tom," Michael concedes, "you've only just reconnected, and after Dad, your father would want me to be happy," Mary says firmly, "just as Helen would want the same for Tom." Sarah reaches for the folder of documents, pulling out another piece of paper. "Look at this. It's a program from the high school production of Our Town. Both your parents were in it together." As Michael leans in to look, Tom and Mary exchange a glance. 60 years ago, they'd sat in that same audience watching their parents perform while holding hands in the dark. Now their children sit together, piecing together a shared history they never knew existed. "Did I ever tell you about the time your grandmother played Emily?" Mary asked Michael. "She was magnificent. Your grandfather couldn't take his eyes off her. That's how they got together, you know." As Mary weaves the story, Tom watches the tension gradually leave Michael's shoulders. Sarah asks questions, drawing connections between families. The afternoon sun warm on their faces, Helen's roses scenting the air. They begin the delicate work of bridging not just years, but generations. "You still have it," Mary says in disbelief, watching as Tom unfolds the faded ticket stub from his wallet. From the spring dance? They're standing in the entrance of the old Mason Hall, now renovated into a community centre. The wooden dance floor gleams under new lighting, but the high windows and Art Deco trim remain unchanged from 1965. "Last dance we had together," Tom says, running his thumb over the worn paper. Didn't know it at the time, of course. The hall is empty this afternoon, except for the young woman setting up chairs for an evening event. She glances curiously at them as they wander the space, two silver-haired figures moving slowly across the floor. "Remember how the band played Moon River?" Mary asks, her eyes distant with memory. "You just learned to do a proper foxtrot." "Stepped all over your feet," Tom chuckles, "but you got better." Mary pauses by the spot where the band used to set up. "By the end of the night, you were leading like you'd done it all your life." From her purse, she pulls out her phone, tapping at the screen with careful precision. The opening notes of Moon River float from its speaker, tinny but unmistakable. "Mary," Tom begins, but she's already holding out her hand. "Dance with me, Tom Baker." His heart thuds against his ribs as he takes her hand. They begin awkwardly, trying to remember where arms and hands should go, how close to stand. But then muscle memory takes over, his hand settling at her waist, her head tilting just so, their feet finding the rhythm that's waited 60 years to continue. "Oh," Mary breathes as they turn slowly. "It's like no time has passed at all," Tom finishes. But time has passed. They move more carefully now, mindful of Tom's arthritic knee and Mary's replaced hip. When she rests her head on his shoulder, he can smell her perfume. Not the lavender of their youth, but something softer, like vanilla and warm tea. The young woman setting up chairs has stopped to watch them, a gentle smile on her face as she takes in their slow dance. "David never really danced," Mary says softly. "He had 2 left feet, bless him. Said he'd leave the dancing to Fred Astaire." "Helen loved it," Tom responds. "We took lessons after Sarah was born. She said every mother should be able to dance at her daughter's wedding." They fall silent, remembering. The music plays on, and Tom marvels at how naturally they still fit together, even as changed as they are. Mary's frame is softer now, and he's lost the height of his youth, but something essential remains, the way she anticipates his turns, how their steps match without thinking. "I miss him," Mary says suddenly. "David. Even now, sometimes I reach across the bed in the morning, forgetting he's gone." She looks up at Tom. "Is that strange? To miss him and still feel this?" Tom supplies. "No, I don't think it's strange at all. Helen will always be part of me, but she told me once near the end that love isn't a finite resource, that there's always room for more if we're brave enough to let it in." The song ends, but they keep swaying gently. Through the high windows, late afternoon sun catches dust motes in its beam, turning them to floating gold. "We're not the same people we were," Tom says carefully. "Those 2 teenagers who danced here in 65, they had their chance. And life took them different ways. But maybe we're right for each other now, exactly as we are." Mary's hand tightens in his. "With all our creaky joints and reading glasses, with our grandchildren and our memories and our separate pasts that somehow led us back here." The young woman approaches, apologetic. "I'm sorry, but we need to set up for tonight's event." They thank her and make their way to the exit, Tom's hand at the small of Mary's back. At the door, Mary turns for one last look at the dance floor. "Tom, They do senior dance nights here every Thursday, in case you're interested." He pats his pocket where the old ticket stub rests. "I might be, though I'll need to practice my foxtrot." "Well," Mary says, her eyes twinkling, "I happen to be an excellent teacher." The shoebox appears on Tom's doorstep on a rainy Tuesday morning. It's wrapped in plastic to protect it from the weather, with a note in Mary's elegant handwriting. I wasn't brave enough to give these to you in person. Read them when you're ready. Inside, he finds dozens of letters organized by date. The earliest postmark is from September 1965, just days after Mary left. The last is dated June 1966. 9 months of letters that never reached him, returned by his father's hand before he could ever know they existed. Tom settles into his armchair, the one by the window where the reading light is best. His hands tremble slightly as he opens the first envelope. "Dearest Tom," he reads, "I've only been gone 3 days, but it feels like forever. Boston is so big, so different from home. Dad's doing better with the new treatments, but he's still so weak. Every time I pass a park, I look for our bench. Silly, isn't it? As if you could somehow be here too." The letter continues, full of small details about her new life, questions about his, plans for Christmas break when she'd hoped to visit. Tom reads it twice, then sets it aside and opens the next one. "The leaves are turning here, but they're not as beautiful as they are in our park. Remember last October when we collected the red ones to press in my biology textbook? I found one yesterday, still perfect between the pages. It made me cry, which embarrassed me in the library." Letter after letter, Mary's voice comes alive on the pages. Her father's good days and bad. Her part-time job at the hospital gift shop. The classes she was taking at the community college, trying to keep up with her education while helping her family. Then he finds the one dated October 15th. "Tom, my first letter came back today marked, 'Return to sender.' I called your house, but your mother said you were at football practice. I'll try again tomorrow. Please, if you get this, just let me know you're okay." Tom's throat tightens. He remembers that autumn, throwing himself into sports and studies, telling himself Mary had moved on, was too busy with her new life to write, all while his father silently intercepted her letters, thinking he was protecting his son from distraction. The later letters grow shorter, their tone shifting from hope to confusion, to hurt. "I don't understand, Tom. If you don't want to write back, just tell me. This silence is worse than anything you could say. Your mother says you're doing well in school. I'm glad. At least I hear about you sometimes, even if it's not from you. Christmas break starts next week. I thought about just showing up at your door, but maybe your silence is saying what you can't bring yourself to write." The final letter is dated June 15th, 1966. By then, Tom was dating Susan Miller, trying to prove to himself and everyone else that he was over Mary Thompson. "Dear Tom," the last letter begins. "I've written this letter a dozen times in my head. Dad's better now, the treatment's worked. We're staying in Boston because he's been offered a position at the hospital. I've been accepted to nursing school. Here, life goes on, doesn't it? Even when we think it can't. I saw your mother yesterday when I was home packing the last of our things. She said you're dating someone new. I hope she makes you happy. I hope she knows how lucky she is. I won't write again after this, but I want you to know that what we had was real, maybe the truest thing I've known. Whatever happened, whatever changed, please don't doubt that. Be happy, Tom Baker. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love, Mary." Tom sits for a long time after reading the final letter, watching rain trickle down his window. He thinks about all the moments these letters represent. Mary writing them in her Boston apartment, his father quietly returning them, both of them moving forward with lives that were good, meaningful, but always carrying the weight of things unsaid. His phone sits on the side table. Mary's number is programmed into it now, under M. His finger hovers over the call button. Instead, he reaches for a pen and paper. Some things need to be written down, need to exist in more than just pixels and digital memory. "Dear Mary," he begins, "I just read your letters, all of them, and there are things you should know." The chest pain starts during their morning walk in the park. Tom tries to dismiss it as indigestion, but Mary sees him wince, notices how his left hand creeps up to rub his shoulder. "Tom?" Her voice carries a nurse's practiced calm. "How long has this been bothering you?" "It's nothing," he says, but his face has gone pale beneath its usual ruddy tone. "Just need to catch my breath." Mary guides him to their bench, her hand steady on his arm. "I'm calling an ambulance." Don't be silly, he protests, but the words come out breathless. Sarah will never let me hear the end of it. Sarah will never forgive me if I don't. Mary's already dialing, her other hand pressed against his wrist, counting beats. Her touch is cool and professional, but he can see the fear behind her composed expression. Everything happens quickly after that. The ambulance, the efficient young paramedics with their questions and equipment, the swift drive to the hospital. With lights flashing, Mary rides with him, her hand never leaving his. In the emergency room, they put a plastic bracelet around his wrist. Hospital patient, 247983, it reads, Baker, Thomas J. The same hospital where Mary once worked as a nurse, where her late husband was chief of cardiology. I'm calling Sarah, Mary says once they've got him settled in a curtained bay. Don't want to worry her, Tom mumbles through an oxygen mask. Too late for that, my love. The endearment slips out naturally, making them both pause. But there's no time to dwell on it as the doctors arrive, speaking in the clipped tones of people who know exactly how precious time can be. Tests follow. Blood draws, EKG, a series of questions he's answered a dozen times. Through it all, Mary stays, her presence both professional and deeply personal. She knows which questions to ask, what each test means, but her hand trembles slightly when she smooths his hospital gown. Sarah arrives in a rush of worried energy. Michael close behind her. I was at his office, she explains to her father's questioning look. We were having coffee, talking about you two. The doctors return with results. Not a heart attack, thank goodness, but unstable angina. A warning shot across the bow. They want to keep him overnight for observation. Maybe do. There are more tests in the morning. I'll stay, Mary and Sarah say simultaneously, then look at each other in surprise. Both of you go home, Tom insists. I'm fine, just an old man who tried to walk too fast. Stubborn as ever, Mary says softly, and Sarah nods in agreement. I'll take first watch, Sarah decides. Mary, you can spell me in the morning. Dad, no arguments. As the night settles in, Tom drifts in and out of sleep, aware of Sarah's presence in the chair beside him. Around midnight, he hears Michael return with coffee. How's Mum? Sarah asks. Worried, but handling it better than I expected after Dad. I remember reading about your father, Sarah says. He was quite renowned in cardiology. Yeah, ironic that his own heart got him in the end. Michael's voice softens. That's why I was so protective when Mum started seeing your dad. Didn't want her to go through that again. And now I'm starting to think maybe it's worth the risk. She's different with him, more alive somehow. Tom wants to tell them he can hear. Them, that he's not going anywhere, that his heart may be troublesome, but it's also fuller than it's been in years. But the medication pulls him under before he can form the words. When he wakes again, daylight is streaming through the window, and Mary's reading in the chair, her silver hair catching the morning sun. The plastic hospital bracelet feels rough. Against his skin, a reminder of mortality and precious time. Mary. She looks up, smiling. There you are. Sarah just left to get some sleep. How are you feeling? Like I've been a fool, he says. Not about the walking, about waiting so long to find you again. Mary's eyes grow bright with unshed tears. We found each other exactly when we were meant to, she says, taking his hand. Now focus on getting better. We have dancing lessons to attend. The handmade card sits propped on Tom's kitchen counter, its crooked letters spelling out "Welcome to the family" in rainbow colors. Emma, Mary's youngest grandchild, had spent all morning working on it, determined to make it perfect for her. Grandmother's special friend. Now Emma sits cross-legged on Tom's living room floor, teaching her new friend Jack, Sarah's 10-year-old son, how to make origami cranes. Their heads bend together over sheets of colored paper, dark hair, and fair, creating a perfect contrast. No, like this, Emma demonstrates, her small fingers moving with careful precision. Grandma Mary taught me. She learned in Japan when she was a nurse. Cool, Jack says, struggling with his own crane. Grandpa Tom taught me how to fish, but I'm not very good at it yet. From the kitchen, Tom and Mary exchange glances over the heads of their grandchildren. They're preparing dinner for both families. All three generations gathering for the first time. The sounds of more grandchildren playing in the backyard drift through the open windows. "Need help with those potatoes?" Sarah asks, entering. The kitchen with Michael's wife, Rachel. "I think we've got it," Mary says, but Sarah's already rolling up her sleeves. "Mom used to make the best scalloped potatoes," Sarah says to no one in particular. "I never got her recipe quite right." "Helen's recipe?" Mary asks softly. "I think I remember it from a church cookbook. She used nutmeg, didn't she?" Sarah pauses, potato peeler in hand. "Yes, how did you—" "I still have that cookbook somewhere. She wrote notes in the margins, little secrets she'd discovered. I always admired how she made everything special." Rachel watches this exchange with quiet understanding. "David was the same way with his chili," she offers. "Had to be just the right balance of spices." The kitchen fills with the comfortable sounds of cooking and conversation. Michael arrives with more chairs borrowed from his house. Tom's son-in-law, Dan, helps rearrange the furniture to fit everyone. "Grandpa," Emma calls from the living room, "come see our cranes." Tom makes his way over, Mary following. The coffee table is covered with colorful paper birds in various stages of completion. "This one's for you," Emma announces, holding up a blue crane. "And this pink one is for Grandma Mary. When you get married, you can put them on your cake." The room goes suddenly quiet. Jack looks up from his mangled attempt at origami, eyes wide with interest. "Are you getting married?" he asks, with a child's directness. Mary recovers first. "We're just good friends, sweetheart." "But you love each other," Emma insists. "I can tell. You look at each other like Mommy and Daddy do." Rachel swoops in with perfect timing. "Who's ready to set the table?" "Emma. Want to show Jack where everything goes?" As the children scamper off to help, the adults carefully avoid each other's eyes. But Tom notices Sarah and Michael sharing a look that seems more amused than concerned. Dinner is a beautiful chaos of past dishes, overlapping conversations, and children's laughter. Stories flow as freely as the wine, tales of both families that weave together naturally, as if they've always been connected. "Remember when Grandpa took us fishing last summer?" Jack asks Emma. "You should come next time. He knows all the best spots." "Can I?" Emma turns to her mother with pleading eyes. "We'll see," Rachel says, but her smile is warm. After dessert, apple pie that Mary and Sarah made together, the younger children start to fade. Emma curls up in Tom's armchair, clutching her carefully made card. Jack sprawls on the couch, yawning. "Time to head home," Michael announces, gathering Emma into his arms. As families collect their things, making plans for next time, Tom and Mary stand in the doorway watching. Their hands find each other naturally, fingers intertwining. "That went well," Mary murmurs. "Better than well," Tom agrees, "though we might need a bigger table." Sarah approaches with Jack, drooping against her side. "Same time next week?" she asks, then adds with a small smile, "Mom would have loved this, Dad, all of it." Later, after everyone has gone, Tom and Mary sit in the quiet kitchen. The handmade card still stands on the counter, its childish letters promising welcome and belonging. "Out of the mouths of babes," Mary says softly. "Emma's quite the matchmaker. She's not wrong, though, is she?" Mary turns to face him. "About how we look at each other." Tom reaches for her hand across the table, thinking of cranes and cards, and families blending like watercolors. "No," he says, "she's not wrong at all." Real estate listings cover Mary's coffee table, each one dog-eared and annotated in her neat handwriting. Tom sits beside her on the couch, studying a photo of a single-story ranch house with a wraparound porch. It's closer to both Sarah and Michael, Mary points out, "and look at that garden space." "Lots of room for Helen's roses," Tom agrees, then catches himself. No, you're right. We should transplant them. Helen would want them cared for." They've been dancing around this conversation for weeks, ever since Tom's health scare made them both aware of how precious time is. Living separately means coordinating schedules, driving back and forth, maintaining two households. But combining their lives means facing decisions neither feels quite ready to make. Your condo has the better kitchen, Tom says, flipping through more listings. But your house has all the grandchildren's favorite hiding spots. Mary sets down her reading glasses. Tom, are we really ready for this? He looks around her condo, tastefully decorated in soft blues and creams, photos of her life with David displayed alongside newer ones of their expanding family gatherings. Everything has its place, just as his house holds 40 years of memories with Helen, arranged exactly the way she left them. Maybe we're approaching this wrong, he says slowly, trying to find one perfect place that fits both our lives. What do you mean? What if, he pauses, gathering his thoughts, what if we kept both places for now, spent time at each, gradually figured out what works? Mary picks up a listing for a charming cottage. You mean not rush into anything? Exactly. We've both had decades of living one way. Maybe we need time to learn how to live another way. A notification pops up on Mary's phone, a new listing from their real estate agent. They lean together to look at it, shoulders touching comfortably. Too many stairs, they say simultaneously, then laugh. I should show these to Michael, Mary says. He's worried about us making decisions too quickly. Sarah too, Tom admits. She keeps sending me articles about senior living communities, as if we're ancient and incapable. Well, my love, we're not exactly spring chickens. The endearment slips out naturally now, no longer causing that momentary pause. Mary reaches for his hand, her fingers warm against his. I like your idea, she says, about keeping both places while we figure things out. But, I want to draw at your house for my things. Tom smiles, remembering how Helen had claimed her space in his bachelor apartment all those years ago, one drawer at a time. Only if I get one here. Deal. Mary collects the listings into a neat pile. And maybe we could look at updating your guest room. Make it more comfortable for when I stay over. Only if we can replace that horrible armchair in your study. My back can't take another evening of reading in it. They continue like this, negotiating small changes that could make each home more welcoming to the other. Tom mentions installing a grab bar in his shower, something he's been reluctant to do but knows is sensible. Mary talks about rearranging her spare room to make space for his beloved record collection. The real estate listings sit forgotten as they plan these smaller transformations. Through the window, they can see Emma and Jack playing in Mary's small garden, their voices carrying up to the second floor. Grandpa, Jack calls, can we dig up some of your roses to plant here? Emma wants to learn how to grow them. Tom and Mary share a look of understanding. Perhaps this is how two lives merge, not in one dramatic move, but in small moments of sharing and growth. A drawer here, a rose bush there, gradually creating spaces that belong to both of them. You know, Mary says softly, David always said homes are built by living, not just by moving in. Helen used to say something similar, that a house becomes a home one memory at a time. Mary leans against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. So maybe we don't need all these listings. Maybe we just need time and drawer space, Tom adds, making her laugh. Outside, the children are making plans for their shared garden, unaware that they're helping bridge two lives, two homes, two histories. Tom pulls Mary closer, thinking how love at 75 is both simpler and more complex than at 17. Less urgent, perhaps, but deeper in its understanding of what truly matters. The Thanksgiving menu sits between them on Tom's kitchen table, covered in two different sets of handwriting. Mary's elegant script lists traditional dishes, turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce. Tom's slightly shakier hand has added his family's must-haves. Helen's sweet potato casserole, Sarah's favorite green bean almondine. 23 people, Mary says, checking her count again. If we include Rachel's parents and Michael's in-laws, can your dining room fit that many? With the extension leaf and the card table for the children, yes. She pauses. Unless you'd rather host here. Tom looks around his kitchen, remembering 40 years of holidays with Helen. The way she'd coordinate everything with military precision, how the house would smell of sage and butter by dawn on Thanksgiving morning. I think, he starts carefully, it's time for some new traditions. Mary reaches across the table, squeezing his hand. We'll bring Helen's china. Sarah mentioned how much it would mean to her. And your cranberry sauce has to be made in David's mother's copper pot. It doesn't taste right otherwise, Mary smiles. Amazing how many memories are wrapped up in recipes and serving dishes. They work on the menu, negotiating between family favorites. Helen's sweet potato casserole will sit beside David's mother's. Cranberry sauce. Sarah's green beans will share space with Michael's wife's famous dinner rolls. What about Grace? Tom asks suddenly. David's family always said the Catholic blessing, didn't they? And yours is Protestant. Mary considers this. Maybe we could have Emma and Jack say what they're thankful for first. Then a simple grace everyone can share. Tom nods, adding this note to the menu. Each decision feels weighted with meaning. Each choice acknowledging the past while making space for the future. Mom always had football on in the living room, Sarah says later when they share the plans. Dad would pretend to watch while actually napping in his chair. We can still do that, Mary offers. David's old armchair is perfect for holiday naps, though we might need to fight Michael for it. He's inherited his father's post-turkey drowsiness. They all laugh, the sound warm and easy now. These conversations have gotten simpler as the weeks have passed, as their families have grown more comfortable with the idea of sharing holidays and traditions. I found this in Mum's recipe box, Sarah says, pulling out a yellowed index card. Her cranberry sauce recipe? But look at the note at the bottom. In Helen's familiar handwriting, Mary Thompson's addition of orange zest makes all the difference. Must remember to thank her at next garden club meeting. Mary's eyes grow bright. I'd forgotten about that. She was so gracious, always giving credit even for the smallest suggestion. Use both recipes, Sarah suggests. Yours and Mum's together, something old, something new. The menu grows longer as they work, not just with dishes, but with memories and meanings. Tom adds a note about Helen's good silverware, which Sarah inherited but insists on bringing. Mary remembers the special kids' table activities David used to organize. He'd have them make hand turkey art while the adults cooked, she recalls fondly. Called it Operation Keep Peace in the kitchen. Dad was wise that way, Michael says, examining the seating chart they've drafted. Think we could continue that tradition. Emma's been practicing her hand turkeys all week. As their children leave that evening, Tom and Mary sit with their completed menu, more a family history now than just a list of dishes. Tomorrow they'll start planning cooking schedules, coordinating oven times, figuring out which serving pieces to use. It's going to be chaos, Mary says contentedly. Beautiful chaos, Tom agrees, thinking of all the people who will fill their merged home with love and laughter. Mary folds the menu carefully, tucking it into her recipe box alongside 60 years of collected family favorites. Helen and David would like this, I think, us figuring it out together. They'd probably laugh at how complicated we're making it. Oh, definitely. Mary's eyes twinkle. But they'd be proud of us too. The Florida travel brochure mocks them from Mary's coffee table, its sun-drenched beaches and swaying palms a stark contrast to the grey February morning outside her window. 3 days of freezing rain have kept them from their morning walks. In the park, from their Thursday dance class, from any semblance of their normal routine. We could be there by tomorrow, Mary says, not entirely joking as she flips through the glossy pages. Look, they have a senior community right on the beach. Tom glances up from his crossword puzzle, seeing the restlessness in her movements. They're both struggling with this enforced indoor time, this disruption of the patterns they've carefully built together. You're not really suggesting we become snowbirds, are you? Would it be so terrible? She settles beside him on the couch, the brochure open to a page showing couples their age strolling along the shore. Just for a few weeks, escape this endless grey. Tom sets his puzzle aside, choosing his words carefully. Mary, is this about the weather or about David? She stills. David's birthday would have been yesterday, a fact she'd mentioned casually over morning coffee, then tried to brush past. But Tom had seen how quiet she'd grown as the day wore on, how her eyes kept drifting to the photos on her mantel. "He loved the beach," she says finally. "We had a timeshare in Fort Lauderdale. Used to spend his birthday there every year." "Tell me about it." "Oh, it wasn't fancy, but it had this little balcony where we'd have coffee in the morning watching the pelicans dive for fish. David would read medical journals. I'd do my needlework, and sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence for hours." Tom takes her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. "We don't have to avoid talking about him, you know. He's part of who you are, the same way Helen is part of you." Mary leans against him, her head finding its familiar spot on his shoulder. I didn't expect it to hit so hard this year. Thought maybe having you would make it easier. But it's different. Not harder, not easier. Just different." She traces the edge of the brochure with one finger. "I love you, Tom. But loving you doesn't erase 40 years with David. Sometimes I feel guilty about that." "I understand." He thinks of Helen's roses in the garden, how tending them still makes his heart ache, even as he plans which ones to transplant. To Mary's yard. Love doesn't follow neat, clean lines. It layers, overlaps. A gust of wind rattles the windows, driving freezing rain against the glass. Mary shivers slightly, and Tom pulls the Afghan, one she knitted during David's hospital, stays around both their shoulders. "Maybe we should take a trip," he says thoughtfully. "Not to Fort Lauderdale. You should keep those memories just for you and David. But somewhere new. Make our own memories." Mary sits up, studying his face. "You hate traveling. I hate airports and tourist traps, but I love you." He picks up the brochure, turning to a different page. "Look, they have a small inn on the Gulf Coast. Private beach, no crowds, close enough to drive if we want." "Tom Baker, are you actually suggesting an adventure?" "A small, carefully planned adventure," he amends, making her laugh, with plenty of time for morning coffee and comfortable silences. The rain continues its steady pattern against the windows, but somehow the grey day feels less oppressive. Mary curls closer, and together they page through the brochure, making tentative plans. A week in March, perhaps, when winter's grip starts to loosen. They could take the scenic route, stop at interesting places along the way. "Helen would be amused," Tom says. "She tried for years to get me to take beach vacations. And David would love that I'm finally learning to make new traditions." Mary closes the brochure but keeps it close. "Thank you for understanding about yesterday. Thank you for trusting me with it." He kisses her temple softly. "Now, how about we tackle this crossword together? I'm stuck on 7 across." Outside, the freezing rain begins to change to snow, transforming the gloomy day into something softer, full of possibility. They work the puzzle together, sharing memories and comfortable silences of their own, while winter wraps its quiet blanket around them. Helen's wedding ring catches the morning light as Tom holds it in his palm. He's kept it in his dresser drawer since her passing, nestled in its original velvet box. Simple, elegant, a gold band with 3 small diamonds that had fit her working hands perfectly. She'd worn it for 40 years, through raising children, tending gardens, and building a life together. "What do you think, sweetheart?" he murmurs to her photo on the dresser. "Would you mind if Mary wore it?" The question has been growing in his mind since their return from Florida. That trip had shown him something, how naturally they fit together, how easily they could build a new life while honoring their past ones. His phone buzzes. "Sarah." "Dad? You sounded strange on your message. Everything okay? Could you come over? There's something I need to discuss." 20 minutes later, Sarah sits at his kitchen table, her eyes fixed on the ring box. "Oh, Dad," she says softly. "I know it might seem too soon." "No." Sarah reaches for his hand. "That's not what I was thinking at all. I was remembering how Mom used to say that love was meant to grow, not stay static. She'd be happy about this." "You think so?" "I know so." Sarah picks up the ring box carefully. But are you sure about using this one? Mary might feel uncomfortable. Tom nods slowly. I've thought about that. But your mother's ring represents 40 years of happy marriage, of love that lasted. That's what I want to offer Mary. Not just my love, but my understanding of what a good marriage can be. Have you talked to Michael? Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Sarah smiles. Because I'm your daughter, or because I'm a lawyer who can explain the practical implications? Both, Tom admits. I know there are considerations at our age. There are, Sarah agrees, shifting into her professional mode. Insurance, medical decisions, estate planning. But those are all manageable. The important question is, are you ready? Tom looks around his kitchen, the space where Helen cooked countless meals, where Sarah learned to bake, where Mary now sits every morning doing crossword puzzles with him. I'm not trying to replace your mother, he says carefully, just as Mary isn't trying to replace David. But I think there's room in life for more than one great love. Sarah blinks back tears. Mom used to say something similar after her friend Clara remarried in her 70s. The back door opens, and Jack bursts in, fresh from school. Mom! Grandpa! Guess what? Emma says her grandmother's getting a drawer. At our house. Does that mean... He stops, seeing the ring box. Is that Grandma Helen's ring? Tom and Sarah exchange glances. Come here, buddy, Tom says. Let's talk about something important. Jack settles into a chair, suddenly serious. Are you going to marry Emma's grandma? I'm thinking about asking her. How would you feel about that? Jack considers this with a child's directness. Would she live here? Would Emma come over more? Would we have two grandmas? Yes to Emma. Coming over more. As for living arrangements, we're still figuring that out. And about grandmas, Tom chooses his words carefully. Grandma Helen will always be your grandmother. Mary would be an addition to our family, not a replacement. Like how I got a baby sister and it didn't make Mom and Dad love me less? Sarah hugs her son. Exactly like that. Cool. Jack grins. Emma's been hoping for this. She says we're already family anyway. Tom meets Sarah's eyes over Jack's head. Out of the mouths of babes, she murmurs. Later, after they've gone, Tom takes the ring to his jeweler. Not to resize it, that wouldn't be right, but to have it cleaned and to look at other options. The jeweler shows him a beautiful sapphire ring that reminds him of Mary's eyes. The trend these days is for second marriages to have their own symbols, the jeweler explains. Tom thinks of Mary's drawer in his dresser, how she's created her own space without disturbing Helen's memories. Perhaps the sapphire is right. A new ring for a new chapter. He tucks Helen's ring back in its box, knowing Sarah will keep it, safe for future generations. Then he picks up his phone to call Michael. It's time to have another important conversation about beginnings, endings, and the beautiful complexity of love in later life. The small brass plaque feels warm in Tom's pocket as he walks through the familiar paths of the park. He'd picked it up from the engraver that morning, a simple design that reads, "Where time stood still and began again. Tom and Mary, 2025. The Parks Department had approved his request to mount it on their bench, though he hasn't shown it to Mary yet. It's early April now, and the maple trees are just beginning to bud. The morning has that particular spring softness that makes everything feel possible. Mary walks beside him, her hand tucked in his arm, unaware that anything special is planned. The daffodils are early this year, she observes, pointing to yellow blooms near the pathway. Nature's full of surprises, Tom says, his free hand touching the ring box in his other pocket. The sapphire catches the light even through the velvet, or so it seems to him. Their bench comes into view, the third one from the fountain where she found him that autumn morning that feels both yesterday and a lifetime ago. Someone has left a coffee cup on it, discarded without thought. Honestly, people these days, Mary sighs, starting forward to clean up the litter. Wait, Tom says, reaching the bench first. He picks up the cup, revealing a small bouquet of daisies hidden beneath it. I believe these are for you. Mary's hand flies to her mouth. Tom. He holds out the flowers. Simple daisies like the ones he'd woven into a crown for her 60 years ago. Remember how you sneezed all afternoon, but wouldn't take that crown off? Because you'd made it just for me. Her voice wavers slightly. You remembered. I remember everything. The daisies, the dancing, the letters that never reached me, the 40 years we spent apart, building different lives, loving different people. He takes her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. That matches his own. But mostly I remember how it felt to fall in love with you twice. Once, when we were too young to understand what love really meant, and again, when we were old enough to know exactly how precious it is. Mary's eyes shine with tears as Tom slowly, carefully lowers himself to one knee. His artificial hip protests, but he manages it gracefully enough. Tom Baker, what are you doing? Your knee is fine, he assures her, though they both know he'll need help getting up. Mary Thompson, you walked back into my life on this very spot and gave me a second chance at happiness. Would you consider giving me a second chance at marriage too? He opens the ring box, revealing the sapphire that echoes the color of her eyes. Not Helen's ring. They'd both known, without discussing it, that some symbols should remain in the past. Oh, Mary breathes, touching the ring with gentle fingers. It's beautiful. Sarah helped me choose it. And Michael, well, he suggested I ask you here, where it all began again. Mary looks around, at their bench, at the familiar paths they've walked together, at the early spring flowers pushing up through last year's leaves. Life has a funny way of bringing us full circle, doesn't it? Is that a yes? She laughs, the sound bright as spring sunshine. Help me get you up first, then I'll answer. Together, they manage to get him back on his feet. Tom pulls the plaque from his pocket, showing her what he's had made. I thought we could mark this spot, he says, for us and for anyone else who needs to believe in second chances. Mary traces the engraved letters with her finger, then looks up at him with eyes full of love and memory and future possibilities. Yes, she says simply. Yes to the ring. Yes to the plaque. Yes to whatever time we have left together. The ring slides onto her finger as if it was made for her hand. Perhaps it was. Tom draws her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, feeling the rightness of this moment. I love you, he whispers against her hair. I love you too. She pulls back slightly, eyes twinkling. Though I hope you know this means we'll have to tell Emma she was right all along about us getting married. She's 7. We'll never hear the end of it. Never, Mary agrees happily. They sit together on their bench, watching the morning unfold around them. Soon they'll call their children, start making plans, face all the complexities that come with merging lives at their age. But for now, they simply exist in this moment, where time has once again stood still and begun again. The small newspaper announcement sits propped against Mary's kitchen window, its simple wording carefully chosen. Mary Thompson and Thomas Baker joyfully announce their upcoming marriage. The ceremony will be held in Maple Grove Park this June. No gifts, please. Your presence is our present. Sarah reads it for the 10th time, making notes in her planner. Are you sure you don't want something more detailed, positive? Mary says, stirring sugar into her tea. We want simple. Simple is relative when you have 5 children and 12 grandchildren between you, Rachel points out from her spot at the kitchen table, where she's addressing invitations. Tom looks up from the guest list he's reviewing with Michael. Speaking of relatives, your Aunt June is insisting on making her famous coconut cake. All 7 layers? Mary asks, eyebrows raised. Apparently it's tradition. She made it for both our first weddings. The room goes quiet for a moment, but it's no longer an uncomfortable silence. They've learned to weave their past marriages into conversations naturally, acknowledging the foundations that brought them to this point. 7 layers it is, Mary decides. Though I hope she remembers some of us are watching our sugar intake now. Michael checks another name off the list. Mom, what about your old nursing colleagues? Barbara and Jean have been calling, already invited. They're bringing their new husbands, both second marriages too. We're starting a trend. Sarah laughs. A 70-something wedding trend. Dad, you're a trendsetter. Just don't expect me to start wearing those skinny ties again. Tom grumbles good-naturedly. They work through the afternoon, sorting details that seemed simple at first, but grow more complex with each consideration. The park permit needs special additions for chairs and a small canopy. Their regular dance instructor has offered to help them modify their favorite waltz to accommodate Tom's hip. Emma and Jack lobby fiercely to be allowed to release butterflies instead of throwing rice. Did you know, Rachel says, checking her phone, that senior weddings are actually becoming more common? There's all sorts of articles about practical considerations, like making sure the ceremony site is accessible. Sarah adds, "Good thing you chose the park gazebo. It's got those new ramps, and keeping the ceremony short enough that people don't get tired," Michael continues, "though Mom and Tom have already thought of that." Mary smiles at her son's use of Tom's first name, a small but significant shift. 10 minutes tops. We've said our long vows to each other already, in all the ways that matter. Tom reaches for her hand across the table, though I wouldn't mind saying them again. "Save it for the ceremony, you two," Sarah teases, but her eyes are soft. The afternoon light begins to fade, and Rachel starts gathering the addressed invitations. "I'll take these to the post office first thing tomorrow. Remember when wedding invitations were this big production?" Mary mimes an enormous envelope. Gold embossing, tissue paper inserts, 3 different response cards. Sarah nods. "But this is better, more honest." Tom studies the simple announcement again. "Like us at this age. Less concerned with flourishes, more focused on what matters." Michael stands, stretching. "Speaking of what matters, Emma wants to know if she can help decorate the park bench. The one where you got engaged? The plaque will be installed next week," Tom says. "Maybe she could help plant some flowers around it. Just not daisies." Mary adds quickly, "I'd rather not spend my wedding day sneezing." They all laugh, and the planning session breaks up naturally. As their children gather their things, Mary and Tom stand in the doorway, arms around each other, watching the easy interaction between their families. "Second weddings are supposed to be simpler," Mary muses. "Less fuss." "True," Tom agrees. "Though I don't remember our first weddings involving quite so many strong opinions from grandchildren, or quite so many considerations about accessibility and blood sugar levels." He kisses her temple softly. "Perfect, isn't it?" The newspaper announcement catches the last of the evening light, its simple words promising not just a ceremony, but a celebration of love that knows its own worth, that has grown richer with time and understanding. The unity candle sits ready on a small table beneath the park gazebo, its white surface etched with their names and the date. 2 smaller candles flank it, one wrapped with a blue ribbon for Tom's family, one with green for Mary's. But it's the brass plate at the candle's base that holds the most meaning, inscribed with words they chose together. "In memory of Helen and David, who taught us how to love." The June morning is perfect, sunny but not too warm, with just enough breeze. To stir the paper lanterns, Sarah and Rachel hung from the gazebo's rafters. Chairs form a gentle arc on the lawn, mostly filled now with their closest friends and family. In Tom's daughter-in-law's garden room, Mary smooths her dove-grey dress, simple and elegant, with its flowing skirt and lace overlay. Emma darts around, her scattering rose petals from a small basket. "Save some for the ceremony, sweetheart," Rachel reminds her daughter. "But Grandma Mary needs to practice walking on them," Emma insists, making Mary laugh. "I think I can manage," she says, touching the small bouquet of white roses and lavender Sarah had arranged. "Though I admit I'm a bit nervous." "You weren't nervous for your first wedding?" Rachel asks. "Oh, terribly. But that was different. I was 22, wearing a giant white dress, worried about tripping down the church aisle." Mary's eyes grow distant with memory. "David was so handsome in his new suit, so serious with the rings." She trails off. But Rachel just squeezes her hand. They've all learned to let memories flow naturally, to understand how past and present weave together. Meanwhile, in the park's small office, Tom adjusts his tie for the 10th time. Jack watches critically from his perch on a desk. "It's crooked again, Grandpa." "Story of my life." Tom sighs, but he's smiling. "Your Grandma Helen used to fix my tie every morning before work. Never could get the hang of it myself." Michael steps forward. "Let me." His capable fingers straighten the soft blue silk. "Dad's ties were always perfect. Surgeon's hands. Used to drive me crazy how neat they were." "Good memories," Tom says quietly, and Michael nods. "The best." The small office clock chimes 11. Sarah pokes her head in. "Ready, Dad? Everyone's seated." Tom takes a deep breath. "Ready." They process naturally to the gazebo. No formal march, just Tom walking with Sarah while Jack runs ahead to take his place next to Emma. The guests rise, smiling, as Mary appears with Michael beside her. She's radiant in the morning light, her silver hair crowned with a wreath of tiny white flowers that Emma insisted on. Their eyes meet across the short distance, and suddenly, Tom's nervousness vanishes. This is right. This is exactly where they should be. The minister, a kind-faced woman from Mary's church, keeps the ceremony brief as planned. When it's time for the unity candle, Emma and Jack step forward with the smaller candles, already lit. "These flames," the minister says, "represent not just two families joining, but the light of love that guides us through all seasons of life, the memories we honor, the present we cherish, and the future we build together." Tom and Mary each take a candle from their grandchildren. Together, they light the center candle, watching the flames merge into one steady light. Their vows are simple, spoken softly but clearly. "Mary," Tom begins, "I promise to love you with the wisdom of age and the joy of new beginnings, to honor our past while building our future, to laugh with you, grow with you, and treasure every moment we're given." Mary's voice trembles slightly as she responds, "Tom, I promise to love you with an open heart and gentle understanding, to dance with you even when our steps slow, to solve crosswords and share silence, and to make every day an adventure of our own choosing." The rings they exchange anew. His a comfortable band of brushed gold, hers the sapphire that matches her eyes. But as they slip them on, they both touch the wedding rings they still wear on their right hands, acknowledging all that brought them to this moment. "By the power vested in me," the minister says warmly, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss is tender, accompanied by Emma's delighted giggle and Jack's exaggerated, "You." The unity candle flickers in the June breeze, two flames joined as one, while their families applaud and the paper lanterns dance overhead. Behind them, the park bench stands witness, its small brass plaque catching the sunlight like a wink of approval from the universe itself. The shared calendar hanging in their kitchen tells the story of their merged lives in different colored ink. Blue for Tom's appointments, green for Mary's, red for their shared activities, purple marks when grandchildren visit, orange for family. Dinners. The current week shows a pleasant tangle of colors. Dance class on Thursday, doctor's appointment on Tuesday, Emma's piano recital on Saturday. "Don't forget your blood pressure reading this morning," Mary calls from the kitchen, where she's measuring coffee with practiced precision. Stronger than she likes it, weaker than he used to make it, a compromise they've perfected over weeks of trial and error. "Already done," Tom responds, adding the numbers to the health diary they both maintain now. "Better than last week. The walking helps," she says, bringing their coffee to the small breakfast table that used to be hers, now positioned perfectly in the morning light that streams through what used to be his kitchen window. They decided to make his house their primary home, with regular stays at her condo when they want to be closer to the city. The transition hasn't been seamless. No major life change at their age could be, but they're finding their rhythm. "Sarah called," Tom says, accepting his coffee cup. "Wants to know if we need help reorganizing the garage this weekend." "Ah." Mary sits beside him, adding honey to her tea. "You mean she wants to make sure we're not lifting anything too heavy? Our children seem to think we've suddenly become fragile," says the man who needed ice on his back after moving my reading chair. They share a knowing smile. Part of their new routine is learning to accept help gracefully, to acknowledge limitations while maintaining independence. The garage does need organizing. They're still figuring out how to combine two households' worth of belongings, what to keep and what to let go. Mary picks up her phone, checking their shared calendar app, a suggestion from Michael that's proved surprisingly useful. Oh, look, the senior center's starting a new painting class next month. You mentioned wanting to try that. We could do it together. Tom considers this. He's never been artistic, but he's learning that marriage, at their age, isn't just about sharing established habits. It's about growing in new directions together. Why not, he says, as long as no one expects a masterpiece. They move through their morning routine with practiced ease. Pills sorted into daily containers, light exercises they do together in the living room, a shared glance at the weather forecast to plan their day's activities. It's different from their previous marriages, more deliberate perhaps, more mindful of health and energy levels, but there's a deep satisfaction in the careful choreography of their days. The mantelpiece holds photos from both their past. Marriages now, alongside new ones from their wedding 2 months ago. They'd worried it might feel strange, these visible reminders of their previous lives, but somehow it works. Helen and David are part of their story, their journey to each other. "Showers free," Mary says, emerging from the bathroom with damp silver hair. "I laid out your blue shirt, the one without buttons. Better for your arthritis today." Tom kisses her cheek in passing, grateful for her thoughtfulness. They're learning each other's physical challenges, adapting without making a fuss. Mary keeps a heating pad ready for his hip. He makes sure her prescription eye drops are always refilled. Later, as they prepare for their morning walk to the park, they move around each other with the ease of dancers who've learned to anticipate their partner's steps. Mary holds Tom's jacket while he slips it on. He adjusts her scarf just the way. She likes it. "Ready?" she asks, picking up the water bottles they always carry now. Almost. He checks their kitchen counter checklist. Doors locked, coffee maker off, phones charged, medical alert buttons in place. Another new routine, born of age and wisdom. The calendar catches his eye again as they head out. So many colors. So many shared moments planned and noted. Tomorrow they'll babysit Emma and Jack. Thursday they'll dance. Saturday they'll applaud Emma's hesitant rendition of Für Elise. Next week holds different adventures, doctor's appointments and family dinners, quiet evenings and active mornings. "What are you thinking?" Mary asks as they step outside into the morning sun. "That I like our routines," he says simply. "That they feel like home," she finishes, taking his hand. "Like us." The anniversary card stands in a place of honor. On their mantel, its handmade cover adorned with carefully drawn hearts and flowers. Inside, each grandchild has contributed their own message, from Emma's careful cursive to the best grandparents, who taught us about second chances, to little Sophie's wobbly scrawl and accompanying stick figures of Grandpa and Grammy dancing. "They even got the walker right," Tom chuckles, pointing to the carefully drawn mobility aid he'd needed temporarily after his minor fall 2 months ago. The walker is decorated with hearts, transforming what could have been a symbol of limitation into one of love. "The children have your sense of humor," Mary says, adjusting the fresh flowers beside the card, daisies, because now there's a medication that helps with her allergies, another small victory of modern medicine. They're preparing for their anniversary celebration in the park, though celebration might be too grand a word for what they've planned. Just family, some cake, not 7 layers this time to Aunt June's disappointment, and the bench where it all began. "Sarah called," Tom says, checking his phone. "They're setting up now. Michael's bringing the new canopy in case of rain." "Our children do love to plan," Mary observes, slipping on the light jacket Tom holds out for her. "Remember how they fretted about the wedding? And now look at them, planning anniversary parties together, sharing grandchild-sitting duties. Going on double dates," Mary adds with a smile, remembering Sarah and Michael's spouse's surprising friendship. They make their way to the park, slowly, steadily. No need to rush anymore. They've learned to move at their own pace, to savor each step. The morning sun plays through the maple leaves, creating patterns on the pathway. Their bench comes into view, its brass plaque now weathered to a gentle patina. Emma and Jack have decorated it with streamers and balloons, though they've carefully left the plaque visible. "Grammy! Grandpa!" Emma runs to meet them, her dark braids bouncing. "Come see what we made." She leads them to the gazebo where they were married, now set up with tables and chairs. A large poster board displays photos from their first year, of marriage, holidays, dance classes, quiet moments at home. In the center is a photograph from their wedding day, the unity candle glowing between them. "Look at this one," Jack says proudly, pointing to a candid shot from Christmas. "I took it myself." The photo shows Tom and Mary on the couch, both asleep during the post-dinner lull. They're holding hands, Mary's head on Tom's shoulder, looking perfectly peaceful and content. "That's going in the album," Sarah says, joining them. She's carrying a large scrapbook tied with ribbon. Speaking of which, the album is another joint project from their children and grandchildren, each month of their first year documented, with photos, tickets from their dance classes, pressed flowers from their garden, receipts from their coffee shop dates. "We know how important memories are to you both," Michael explains, his arm around his wife. "So we wanted to help preserve these new ones." Mary turns the pages slowly, each one telling the story of their shared life. There's the trip to the Gulf Coast, where they'd walked on the beach and tried watercolor painting, the weekly dance classes, where they'd gradually modified their steps to accommodate aging joints without losing the joy of movement. There are harder memories too. Tom's fall, Mary's brief hospital stay with pneumonia, but even these pages show their strength together, their families united in support. "Look," Tom says softly, pointing to a photo of their first Thanksgiving as a married couple. The dining room table is crowded with faces, both families blended seamlessly together. Aunt June's 7-layer cake stands proudly at the center. "I love this one." Mary touches a picture of them at Emma's piano recital, both beaming with grandparental pride. "Though I'm not sure we needed documentation of my attempt at oil painting." "Are you kidding?" Sarah laughs. "That abstract blob you called Sunset is a masterpiece. Jack has it hung in his room." They continue through the album, each page bringing fresh memories and laughter. The grandchildren point out their contributions, ticket stubs they'd saved, drawings they'd made, moments they'd thought important enough to capture. "Grammy," Emma says suddenly, "are you crying?" "Happy tears, sweetheart," Mary assures her, dabbing at her eyes. "Sometimes joy just spills over." Tom squeezes her hand, understanding completely. Their first year together has been full of such moments. Joy spilling over, love expanding to embrace both past and present, family circles widening to include everyone. The memory book lies open on their park bench, its pages filled with photographs, notes, and mementos from the past year. A young couple walking nearby slows down, drawn by the sight of Tom and Mary sitting together, silver heads bent over the album in the early morning light. "Excuse me," the young woman says hesitantly, "but are you the couple from the plaque, the one about second chances?" Tom and Mary look up, sharing a smile. This happens more often than they'd expected. People stopping to ask about their story, drawn by the simple message on their bench's brass plate. "We are," Mary says warmly. "Would you like to sit?" The young couple hesitates, then joins them. The woman's eyes are red-rimmed, suggesting recent tears. Her companion looks worried, protective. "We saw your story in the local paper last year," the young man explains, "about finding love again later in life. We've been going through a rough time, and somehow we ended up here." "Sometimes the heart knows where it needs to go," Tom says, gently, recognizing something in their faces, the same mix of hope and fear he and Mary had faced when rebuilding their lives. Mary turns a page in their memory book, revealing photos of their blended family gatherings. "Life rarely follows the path we expect," she says. Sometimes it takes detours that seem like endings, only to lead us to new beginnings. The young woman wipes her eyes. How do you know when it's really a new beginning, not just wishful thinking? Tom and Mary exchange glances, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. The morning sun catches Mary's sapphire ring as she reaches for Tom's hand. You don't, Tom admits. You just have to be brave enough to find out. They talk quietly as the park comes alive around them. Other regular morning visitors pass by, the jogger who always waves, the woman with 3 dogs who's learned to pause so they can pet the friendly golden retriever, the young mother whose baby they've watched grow from infant to toddler. This is their time, their place. Every morning, weather permitting, they make their way to this bench. Sometimes they bring coffee in thermal mugs. Sometimes they just sit and watch the world wake up. Often, they find themselves sharing their story with others who seem to need it. Look, Mary says, turning to the latest page in their memory book. It shows Emma and Jack at their school's Grandparents' Day, proudly introducing our extra grandmother and grandfather. There's a photo of their latest dance competition, silver category now, but still dancing. Pictures of quiet moments at home, family gatherings, everyday triumphs and simple joys. We're writing our story every day, she tells the young couple, and every day we're grateful for this chance to write it together. The young woman touches a photo of Tom and Mary's wedding day. It's not too late to start over. My dear, Tom says, thinking of that autumn morning when Mary's shadow first fell across his bench. It's never too late for love. Sometimes life just needs to teach us a few lessons first. As the young couple leaves, looking lighter somehow, Mary leans against Tom's shoulder. We've become quite the relationship counselors in our old age. Wisdom comes with experience, he says, turning another page in their memory book. And we've had quite a lot of both. The morning deepens around them, sunlight dancing through maple leaves that are just beginning to think about autumn. Soon it will be time for their regular coffee date, then perhaps some gardening if Tom's hip isn't troubling him. Later, Emma and Jack will come over for their weekly baking lesson, though honestly, they spend more time telling stories than actually baking. Penny, for your thoughts? Mary asks, noticing his contemplative smile. Just thinking about time, he says, how it can move in circles, bringing us back to places we thought we'd left behind, but with new understanding. Like this bench? Like everything. We sit here every morning just like I used to sit alone, but now, he gestures to their memory book, to the life they've built together. Now, every morning feels like a gift. Mary closes the book gently, its pages holding their past year, while their hearts hold the promise of more to come. Ready for coffee? Always. They stand together, gathering their things with the careful movements of age. But their steps are sure as they walk their familiar path, hands clasped, hearts full. Behind them, their bench stands ready to hold. More stories, more beginnings, more chances for love to come full circle in its own perfect time.